morning, friends. A hearty welcome to all of you at the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. And a pleasure for me today to welcome Mr. Vikram Pawah. Vikram is the President and CEO of the BMW Group in India. Hearty welcome to you, Vikram, and we are privileged to have you today on the show with us.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for having me over, and greetings to everyone online. Hope everyone is safe and healthy.
Right. Friends, let me introduce Vikram first. Vikram has done his Bachelor of Commerce Honours from Delhi University. He's got a Master of Business Administration from Victoria University, Melbourne. And friends, he has worked almost or around 20 years with the Honda cars in Australia and India. And before joining BMW Group in 2017, he was the MD of Harley Davidson in India. Vikram, let's start now. First, we are in the midst of a second wave of COVID or COVID 2.0. Now, BMW has a very catchy and apt slogan, Vikram. I found it quite interesting. Drive can wait, safety cannot. So we would like to know from you, Vikram, what has been the initiatives of BMW India in coping with this COVID? How is your team coping with it? And how do you see the new normal in the automobile industry, Vikram?
Yeah, Rajesh, you're right. I think we are very clear in how we're communicating to our customers about drive can wait, but safety cannot, because I think we want to put first thing first, which is the safety of our customers, our teams. I think that is the most important thing for us. And we all, are facing the severity of the second wave. It's, I think, more important for us to stay indoors, break the chain, flatten that curve, because that's the only way it can happen. That's what we learned in the first wave as well. So I think the first opportunity we got is we started communicating to our customers about staying indoors, communicating about them about get vaccinated, and do our bit to make sure that this pandemic does not have the the societal impact that it is already having. So we need to break that trend somewhere. So the reason why we got here in terms of communicating this to our customers is what we learned during the first wave is, what the priorities are. So like I said, the first priority we put in place for ourselves is always about safety of our team, safety of our customers. That is number one, and that's non-negotiable. We'll do everything possible to make sure that happens. The second aspect that we keep on working on is being operational at all times, because unless we are operationally capable, we cannot help anyone. We cannot help the community. We cannot help our customers. We cannot help our teams. So being operationally capable at all times is also number one priority for us. And then we start looking at how can we use this time to prepare for a fantastic bounce back as well. So those are the three-pronged approach we normally use to get through this situation. So if I just touch upon what we are doing, and I'll start from the community side, because I think that's the most important, because I think this pandemic 2.0 is clearly showing us the impact on the society, on the community, and I think it's much closer to us than what it was in pandemic 1.0. I think all of us realize that clearly. It has an emotional, mental impact on all of us as well. So we've done a lot of stuff from a community angle, money aside. So we've outlaid already 8 crore rupees over these two waves now. We did the 3 crores in 2020. We've outlaid another 5 crores for this year, and we're engaging with multiple partners in our area of operation, which is Gurgaon, Delhi NCR area, and Chennai, where our plant is. Those are the two areas we're focusing on with the local authorities, with the local private players, to make sure we are able to provide some help to the communities in this time. So we've set up some isolation wards, some PCR labs in Chennai. We're helping Gurgaon District Health Administration for sample collections, for testing, providing those mobile vans, helping them that. Some critical care in hospitals, we are supporting that as well. And also on a straight, direct support as well, other than doing those nutritional support, those lab supports that we normally do in these societies that we work with. We took the initiative to import 150 oxygen concentrators from overseas actually during this time, and we have provided that to our partner, which is Give India, as part of the Oxygen for India initiative. We've contributed to those bank, and that's being used in the Delhi NCR area now. So we did not wait for for these situations to improve, we took out ourselves, our global BMW teams pitched in. We got some from US, we got some from Thailand. So you can imagine, literally, wherever we could get our hands on these oxygen concentrator, we were able to import it like overnight, literally, for this community. Then moving on to our employees, obviously, like I said, teams are very important. We all need to, be sure that we are together at the end of this. I think that's the most important thing. That's the only way we can bounce back. So we've done everything possible in terms of our employee assistance, including their families. So we've set up special, on-call doctor services, testing services. We have done vaccination drives now for all our employees and their families, right? We conducted that in our training center in Gurgaon, in Chennai, in our plant. We've tied up with a lot of other, ambulance services and everything else to make sure that, our associates and their families have an uninterrupted, phase through this pandemic. That's what we're looking at. Also, health insurance, term insurance. We're making sure we do that. While we were importing oxygen cylinders for community, we also imported for our staff as well at the same time. So we made sure that everyone is safe, healthy. And I'm glad to say that, for us as a team, the worst looks like it's over, and we're ensuring that the teams get back on track, healthy and safe again. So similarly, then we extended, obviously, this thing to our customers, right? Like I said, that when you're doing it for the community, you're doing it for your employees, then obviously customers are associated to us for a very long time as well, and they expect us as a brand to be with them during this time. So I think we are clearly indicating, yes, we are with you. We understand what is happening. So whatever little we can do, I guess, in these terms, like warranty extensions, contactless experiences, because, at times you still need your cars and you may need a service from time to time, because if you need to move in an emergency or something, you need to make sure your car is running. So we ensure that you don't have to worry about it. We'll do a complete contactless, a service pickup for you, drop off for you. Don't worry about that, right? Obviously making sure that, ensuring all the gratitude that we can do our customers in terms of offering them, like doctors and things like that, some free services, and whatever we can do for the community, we are doing that. Obviously, encouraging our customers to go and get vaccinated as well. We actually put on a social campaign that not only our customers there, but anybody who gets vaccinated, tell us, send us a picture, we'll send you a small token of appreciation for that, because I think those are the little things we can do as a community. Because I think as a business, we all impacted because of the lockdown. Obviously, it's at a standstill. Slowly, it's opening up now. I think over the last week, I've seen a little bit of opening, but clearly there is a business impact. But I firmly believe that it'll bounce back strong. I think, and that's what we've seen in many other countries as well. The business does bounce back strong, but obviously we need to get through the social and psychological impact first and make sure we're all safe through this. So, Rajesh, that's how we're handling it, a very simple and a very human way.
So, I think compliments, and as an Indian, Vikram, I would also like to thank BMW Group for supporting India in its fight against the COVID. So I think compliments to you and the team for the good work you're doing and the support structure you're providing also to the local administration and the government. And as you mentioned, important is that the team also remains healthy, remains safe. I think that is the key priority what most of the organizations have at the moment. Vikram, coming to the pandemic now, what we've generally seen, Vikram, is that the automotive suppliers, they have leveraged technology, looking at the back-end operations to make production smarter, supply chain more resilient. But what about however, due to pandemic, do you see a thrust when we talk about direct to customer options for automakers? Do you see the pandemic leading to a shift or some new trends emerging here?
Yeah, clearly, I think there are clear some trends emerging, and I think these trends have been there for a long time. Maybe what I'll say is what this situation is doing is this crisis kind of speeding them up, the adoption of those trends, or the impact of those trends are becoming even more prominent. But when I look at ourselves as BMW Group in India, we've been always being very progressive in our digital side of business, making sure we're giving enhanced customer experiences on digital side, and it's not only in production. We always made sure the business processes on the sales side, customer interface, retail methods, everything we're looking at from a digital perspective, and this has helped us adapt to the situation much faster than probably some of the other players. because if I look at it, we launched our online end-to-end sales platform in 2018. Okay. Yeah, we already had an online sales platform in 2018, but obviously, the adoption wasn't that great because there was no need, I would say, from a customer perspective. But I think the pandemic clearly showed that when the showrooms were shut down, people still wanted to interact, still wanted to, spend time on their passion. So that allowed them to, browse the cars, configure their cars, and even order a test drive. So again, a complete contactless experience that we launched during this pandemic helped us because we were already ready with those platforms. Similarly, on our service side of business, we had launched in 2019 what we call as smart videos, which allowed our customers to, remotely look at what's wrong with your car and give approvals for repairs, right? So basically, the technician would do a smart video, in an interactive format. He'll show you where the problem with the car is, what he's identified when he checked the car. You can see it visually so that you have the trust in this. That's completely transparent, and then you can give your approval online as well. Everything is known, everything is transparent, so you already have that. Again, that helped us during this pandemic because, again, people could not visit the workshop, and we were doing a pickup and drop off, right? So people were able to easily ensure that their car is being looked after, is being repaired the way they wanted, and then they're fully involved in that process. Also, a lot of our fans and customers, love buying our lifestyle items, right? The BMW and Mini lifestyle collection. So we've had that since 2018 with Amazon, right? With the priority delivery. So we already had that in place. So again, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of demand for those things happening again as well. So I would say that, these kind of things have accelerated, no doubt about it. The adoption, the usage, the acceptance by customers of these platforms has, like overnight changed, which is good because I think that is creating a new kind of a normal in future, I think. But I don't think the physical part disappears altogether. I don't think that happens in our industry. I think we're still a touch and feel, driving. We got to have that connection with the car before you buy it. So that will still happen, but a lot of research, a lot of dialogue, a lot of those administrative stuff can be done online, which we are seeing it is happening. So during this pandemic, we launched a lot of models, special models, some online specials as well for our customers, right? And we could see that they really liked it because you could reserve your car, then you could go and have a look and take the delivery later on. So you could have those kind of a staggered approach to the sales process as well. Similarly with the service, booking your service online, making sure that you're not leaving your home. All those, I think, have adapted very quickly. So yeah, that'll become the new normal. I think it'll be a good portion of how you interact digitally with the customers and how it will lead to an even more personalized and interactive kind of a engagement with your prospective customer or existing customers. So I think it's a great thing. I think this pandemic has given us a very good combination of what we call as the phygital life spaces now, right? So it's going to be good.
Right. And if I may ask you, Vikram, what is the percentage of online sales that is happening?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you. Yes, I'd lost you.
I lost you in between. I said I lost you in between. I couldn't get that question. So could you repeat that question, please?
Right. I wanted to ask you, Vikram, what is the percentage of the online sales that you're seeing?
So I think online sales, it depends on how you define it, right? So if you define as, how much, payment do you make online, if that's what you define as sales, probably, I don't think we're there yet. Okay. Right? Because I think that part is still happening in a physical space because, there's finance involved, all those things are involved. So I think that thing still happens. But if I talk about when the interaction starts, right, with the customer, when the sales process starts on a digital space, I think we're talking about more than a quarter. More than 25% is already starting there. So we could see that. And I think as these adoption of these technologies happen more and more, we're seeing, so for example, like I said, when we did these specials, like we did the X5, X7 Dark Edition, Shadow Edition we just launched the day before yesterday. We're doing it only on online, right? Now that's disappearing fairly quickly, right? So 100% of those things will happen online. We did the M340i, which was our first, the fastest car to be built in India, right? The fastest car that you built in India went in the fastest way as well. An initial allocation of units went in 24 hours. They were gone, right? So yeah, it depends on, I think, the engagement with the customer. So I'm not so much worried about what's the ratio of sales. I think it's more how much interactions can you do online with customers and their convenience. That's more important. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's very good that the customers in India are also accepting the digital platform rather than the touch and feel.
Yeah, I think the adoption in India is quite good. I would say adoption in India is very good. I would say from a worldwide perspective, and I think you would expect that we are a younger population. We are more digital natives than probably the rest of the world. So I think the adoption of digital technologies in India will be even faster.
That's right. Vikram, there was an interesting McKinsey study, and what they had said that the supply chain disruptions could occur every 3.7 years, and this could last for almost a month or so. Now, amidst this uncertainty, how can companies actually build a resilient operational system covering the entire value chain? Vikram, is that at all possible, or we have to keep a certain factor of risk always in mind?
Yeah, I think, a very interesting question, and I think interesting study as well that you mentioned about McKinsey study. It was quite, when I read that as well, the statistical analysis they did was quite phenomenal, and the predictions are also quite starking. But I think we all know, we've been in the automotive industry for a long time, right? And we know that if there's any complex industry, automotive industry is one of them, right? In terms of complexity, because the supply chain is quite complex. It's global, right? It is the number of partners you deal with is phenomenal. The tiers of partners you deal with is more complex than probably any other industry. So yeah, I think we're subject to multiple challenges at all time. And I think if I look at last 18 months, probably more than anything, I think the additional challenges that were posed with the shortage of containers, shortage of ships, right? The Suez Canal, the semiconductor shortage that nobody could foresee, right? And now we're facing the raw material, surge, right? Demand surge and price surge and all those kind of things. So yeah, I think we're used to all those disruptions in the past, including oil shortages in the past. If you remember the shocks that we had from time to time, which kind of shook the industry. So I think all these will continue from a supply chain point of view, but I think also will start happening from a customer demand perspective as well. Because I think more and more requirement for sustainable solutions are coming, right? And I think that will pose a lot of challenge for the industry as well. And I think the companies will need to reshape their global supply chains in line with that challenge. So whether we can solve it 100%, I don't know. I think it depends on a company how prepared you are, what resources you put behind it, what thought process you have that behind these kind of things. So you need to lay a very solid foundation. And I think BMW as a group, if you look at it, we have been very robust in our performance. So even if I look at, let's say, this pandemic time, the last 18 months when all these disruptions were taking place, I can say confidently that we had no disruption because of supply chain, right? Did not have any disruption because of supply chain. If there was any shutdown in production or loss of production, that happened more because of the local lockdowns that happened in those areas. Right. But I did not have to shut down my production because there was a kind of a disruption in the supply chain. And I think that happens because we laid a very sustainable and solid foundation for our supply chain from day one. It's not something we did it during the crisis. We've done that always in the past as well. We have a very good strategy behind our what we call as the vendor strategy or the supplier purchasing strategy. There's a group that especially works on this. We're very transparent with our suppliers. We are very communicating with them regularly. We talk about longer term trends. We talk about what the basic tenets are that we can do in our strategy. So we obviously select our suppliers as everybody do in a very rigorous way. You've got to make sure you're picking the best of the lot. We produce the best cars in the world. We want to make sure that our supplier base is also best of the lot, be it in quality, innovation, flexibility, cost. Flexibility we put a lot of emphasis on, but more importantly, sustainability as well. We put a lot of emphasis on that, right? So obviously that helps. And then we always have an alternative supplier structure. We make sure that we have a great alternate supplier structure so that we reduce dependencies. And I think it's good for both parties that way. I mean, it's not that it's one-way street. It's always a two-way street that way. We make it sure, right? And we continuously work with them, making sure that, we are, if we can, procure as close to the manufacturing location.
Okay.
Right, we try to do that as much as possible, as long as those, the basic parameters of quality, the business case, everything stacks up. We make sure that you're procuring as much as you can, as close to the. So even in India, we get the engines, made up in India, right? The axles come from India. So all those, critical parts, we make sure that they are close by, so that at least if the impact is there, and the impact is because of the local. Not because of the regional or global impact. And then obviously we try to mitigate those risks as much as possible by forecasting as better as we can. I know it's very difficult to forecast, but we also remove dependencies. So for example, we've been working for a very long time because I think sustainability has been an agenda for us for a very, very long time in BMW Group. It is not something new. It's only thing is, we are now making sure that we are communicating that to the world now, because now we've got an end-to-end sustainable solution. Right. So right from the time we procure the parts till the time we, dispose of the car, we have a complete sustainable solution in place now. So I think now is the time we're communicating it. But we always worked on the supplier end much, much earlier. So we have reduced the dependencies of, for example, some of those critical raw materials very, very early on. We already did that by substitution, getting some long-term contracts in place if you could not substitute it. So we always worked on that. So including semiconductors, we already had a good long-term contract with the suppliers as well.
Okay.
So I think we're lucky that way, that we have been very rigorous in our planning, in our communication with our supplier base, making sure that we are transparent, we have a trustful relationship, and I think that makes it a little bit easier to navigate through these crises. But I think still many things are unknown. A lot of things happen from time to time. But I think if as an organization you have built in a capability to take bold decisions, to be agile, then you can walk through these things much easier. Obviously, we can't say that we'll have no impact, but at least you can minimize the impact on your operations as much as possible.
Right. If I could pass this very well, Vikram, I had read a very interesting phrase, agile in fragile times. So I think that's what you all are geared up for.
That's right. You're right. That's very apt word for that. That's correct, yeah.
Absolutely. Vikram, let's come to a little bit to the partnership ecosystem. Now, in the engineering industry, we see a lot of partnerships coming between companies. This could be utilizing common resources where the strength is either for R&D activities, tapping on new customer base. So how do you see this trend with the automakers? Do you see this is, of course, we do have some examples, but do you think this, because of the pandemic and the unpredictability, do you think this will gain more steam in the future, Vikram?
So Rajesh, I'm not sure whether we can say whether the pandemic is going to be the trigger for that kind of a paradigm shift, okay, in terms of collaborative approach or a kind of a different approach than what it used to be in the industry earlier. I think it's probably more driven from the way the mobility paradigm is shifting altogether. Right, we've seen that over the years, it is moving away into a complete mobility solution, sustainable, global mobility paradigm. It is not anymore about that's my car. It's more about what's my mobility solution. I think it's more driven from that customer angle and the way the technology is merging into that customer trend shift as well. So on one side, the customer's talking about that I'm looking at a mobility solution because now I look at life and products as solutions. I've moved away from those just purely the product features. I'm looking more on how it currently all combines into one space. So if you look at how the automated driving is happening, or how the connected cars are happening, or the electrification, or even shared services, what we call as the ACEs. So how they are evolving. I think that is the trend that is going to cause more a collaborative approach, because these trends are very high on technology requirement, on innovation, on rapid development, right? So these are not typical product development spaces anymore. This is a space where you're talking about it is shifting almost on an hourly basis, right? You're catching up. So I think these are the areas where I see which will drive the need for more collaborative approach. I think I don't think we can shy away from that this is something that anybody can do it alone. I think this will require a more collaborative approach, not even within the industry, but across industries. So we've experienced that globally ourselves. We have already gone through that cycle of a lot of collaboration. So I can think of some of them on top of my head, like we tied up with Intel from memory, right, with Daimler, with NTD, with even Audi and ourselves for the digital mapping services when they started, the HARE digital mapping services when it initially started out. We tied up with Toyota Motor Corporation for the fuel cell technology, because again, these are technologies that require more futuristic, require kind of a joint approach, joint investments from time to time. We worked with Ford, with Daimler, with Volkswagen, with Hyundai, on the high power charging network in Europe. Because again, if you want a fast chargers, you want that great charger for the electric mobility. That is not something that you can do it yourself. You need to find pool in resources, you need to pool in thoughts, pool in expertise to do it as well. Similarly, we tied up with competition, with Daimler in Germany and various other countries for what we call as the Now services, where you have sustainable mobility services, be it, you can charge now, you can reach now, you get a kind of a shared mobility, or you can park now, you can find the parking, or you can share now, share your cars as well. So it is more about, picking up on those small little trends that are starting in the customer life spaces, where they're talking about that I want to use my car more as a kind of a resource instead of something as an asset, right? So for those things, we are doing that. Those things we feel that, are not something that are your competitive advantage. I think this is more a service to a customer, and when it comes to those kind of spaces, you need to join space. So that's on what we call as a product innovation technology side of things. But similarly on the retail side, I think the collaborative approach will increase even more and more, and especially for our space, which is the luxury or the premium space, because I think there are a lot of synergies on across industry, which are working on that premium space as well. So we already do that. For example, we have a lot of collaborative approaches with hotels already, or with some of the premium brands like Montblanc, some of the top end, luxury jewelry brands, watches brand. Then we see that there's a lot of synergy for us with the customers like that. So yeah, it will evolve, I think, and pandemic probably maybe giving it a thought to people to think about it. I don't think that's the trigger, Rajesh. The trigger more comes from, I think, the customer and the way the technology is evolving along with it.
Right. You spoke about mobility, Vikram. Let's come to the e-mobility. Now, electromobility in Indian e-vehicle, the government has been pretty proactive. We've got the FAME 1, then we have the FAME 2 that has come in. But if we look at the scenario in India, I think to some extent we've got the penetration in the two-wheeler, three-wheeler segment happening, Vikram. But the passenger vehicle segment, I think there the penetration is pretty low at the moment. So how do you foresee the e-vehicle ecosystem in India, Vikram? And I would add a second part of the question is, what would be the offerings of BMW in this domain?
Yeah, no, I think you touched upon a topic which is very close to my heart. I'm quite passionate about e-mobility, and I don't think I've ever minced any words about this, because I truly believe that if as a society we want to move towards a more sustainable solution, then e-mobility is the right one. But I will preface that with the thing that it needs to be completely sustainable. Right. So it should not be partially sustainable. So it's not just about using an electric vehicle. It should be that the vehicle should be manufactured in a sustainable way. The charging infrastructure needs to come from a sustainable energy source, and then the disposal of all the equipment that happens at the end of the life cycle needs to be very sustainable as well. And that's why, as BMW Group, we are very clear about that. We entered the space of e-mobility, I think, way back in 2013. We were the ones pioneers in the premium industry to start with the e-mobility, and that's why we learned our lessons early on. And I think that's why we're much more advanced in the way we talk about e-mobility in a very sustainable way. But that's all about us. But let's now step back into understanding what the global context is. So the global context is, first of all, that there was a rapid adoption of e-mobility now happening, especially after the pandemic. I think we've seen that much more, because I think one thing is, let's put it, one of the plus sides of the pandemic has been that it has been an eye opener for all of us in terms of what impact we as humans have on the environment. I think that has become pretty evident for all of us. So I think everybody's looking at how can I contribute to that? How can I become more sustainable? So e-mobility is catching up. But does that mean the traditional IC engine technology disappears? I don't think so. And I think there's a clear coexistence we are looking at in terms of sustainable mobility solutions in certain areas where you were talking about ultra metro areas, high dense areas. Here probably the adoption will be much faster, but when you come out of towns, then you'll still have some traditional drivetrains running as well. So we have been contributing as BMW Group from day one. Like I said, in 2013 we started it. We've invested a lot in our EV technology, in the capabilities of producing EVs, and I think we were able to accelerate all our plans when this trend shift happened. So I think you heard us declare that by 2023 we'll have 25 electrified models, and we're going to have 7 million electrified vehicles on road by 2030 worldwide. So that's and 2/3 of them will be fully electric. So when we say electric, we also talk about plug-in hybrid electric vehicles as well, because I think there is this kind of a gradual learning curve that happens with electric mobility. It doesn't happen overnight. It's like you need to learn to charge. You need to still get away with the anxiety, and I think that's where the focus needs to be. So when I look at now India in terms of the FAME, the FAME 1, or the mission plan that started in 2013. I remember when we launched the i3, I was not in BMW at that time, but I saw at that time I was still in the auto industry. So I could see this mission plan 2013, right, about future mobility. And then the FAME 1 came in 2015, and then we had the FAME 2, and then now FAME 3 is being talked about. But I don't think that has yielded the desired result here, right, for maybe the four-wheeler side. I think we need to really evaluate the merits of such kind of schemes, whether they are the right one, because I think, first of all, we need to understand from a customer perspective, there's still some barriers that need to be removed, right? So the acquisition cost, the performance of the car, the range anxiety, lack of charging infrastructure, right? So I think, and the choices. How many choices do I have in EV right now when I want to buy one? And car is all about choices. We know that, right? Car is not about, this is all you get. So it's no more about, you can get any color as long as it's black. It's no more like that. I want a shade of black now, and I want a white in between that. So it's become much more complex than that simplistic thing about, it's just a car. So I think from our perspective as OEMs, as brands, I think what needs to be looked at is a clear long-term roadmap. So from a customer perspective, there are these barriers, that they need to be addressed. But from a brand perspective as well, we need to make sure that we have a clarity about what is the roadmap. Are we talking about these incentives that are in place today for GST? Will they remain for long, right? How will the charging infrastructure development take place, right? How will that funding take place? How will the rates of charging remain for longer term? What is the policy framework behind that? Who's going to be monitoring that? What is the governance structure for that? We don't know all those things right now in India, right? And I think that makes it very difficult for us to commit to long-term investment, because if you want to invest for electric mobility manufacturing, let's say, that's a long-term investment we are talking about. That's quite heavy investments. So we need to make sure that these things are clear as well. So I think from a recommendation perspective, if I say, what do we need to do? I think, because I truly believe that India can achieve that target of 30% e-mobility, that we are clearly putting as a mission plan. Yes, it is possible to do that, but we need to do certain things very clearly, right? So we need to focus on creation of the market first. So I think we need to look at a few radical things. You need to create that first wave of demand, those first mover customers who want to come and adapt to these technologies, right? We've got to make it easy for them. So for me, I've always been asking, the government needs to really, if they're serious about it, they really need to demonstrate that, Why don't we allow for import of the electric vehicles first quickly? Put a cap on it, you don't have to make it free for all. Put like 1,000 units a year. Right? That's okay. It allows for adoption of that technology, people to experience the latest technologies first. Right? So that helps in creation of the demand, because when the demand comes up, and then you put along a clear long-term plan in front of us, as Brian said, okay, this is a roadmap for charging infrastructure, this is a roadmap for the incentives or how the incentives will remain and disappear over a period of time, then we can start looking at staggered local manufacturing approach, right? That can come through. And that will make sure that we get the latest and greatest technology in India from day one. Otherwise, we'll always have a lag. We know that. That's what happens is that unless there is demand, and if all these restrictions of, you have to produce 100% here from day one, if that remains, we can't get the latest technologies ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, that's all it's all about, I mean, when I look at even the GST right now, nobody's talking about plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, right? Now, that's a great resource saver for the country while the charging infrastructure develops. It can save fuel for the company, and fuel is imported by us. So as an Indian, I would also say, why are we not looking at that? That's a clear saving for us as a country, right? It helps us establish the charging infrastructure and adoption of those technologies, and then you can switch it at some point. But we don't look at that at the moment, and that's a little bit frustrating, I would say, from a brand perspective from time to time. But I'm still very confident that the mission is right of achieving 30% electric mobility. Let's just keep that focus. Let's create that clear, priorities for us that create the demand, create the infrastructure and roadmap, and then let the suppliers fill that demand. As simple as that. Let the market forces work towards that. Yeah.
Right. I think very valid and relevant points you've raised, Vikram, and as you clearly mentioned, that the focus is there, the government has a plan, but now it is how that plan can be implemented and what role the government can play and what role the industry can play in implementing that. Right. Vikram, would have loved to continue the discussion. We are running short of time, so the last question, Vikram, is we're seeing in these unpredictable times, the path for the CEOs, heads of the organization, is also pretty tough. What we would like to ask you, Vikram, is 3 tips from your side, and I'm sure these tips would benefit also our audience as well as the CEOs of the German companies. What can the CEOs do to take their boat in the stormy water of COVID to safety in this unpredictable times, Vikram?
Yeah. No, you're right. I think, I'm reminded of something that I learned a long time back. I thought it always said that CEOs are not required till the time his business is running smoothly, right? So you're only required when you're in crisis, right? Otherwise, it's supposed to be an autopilot. And if your teams are in place and you made sure you've got the right resources and teams in place, then normally, if you disappeared, it doesn't matter. Business still runs, right? So yeah, I think crisis puts the true test of leadership, no doubt about it. And when I say leadership, it's not just about the CEO. I think it's finally about the entire teams. The leadership happens at various levels for me. It's not about that, only one person can drive it. Okay, yes, one person can probably initiate it, but that initiation can happen from any level in the organization.
Right.
And I think you're asking me to summarize it in 3 points. I don't know how you do that, though, because it's such a complex situation. Especially this pandemic was, I think, one of the most complex probably we would face in our lives, I would say. I don't think our generation has faced that. So probably we'll be telling our grandchildren we lived through this and how we got through this. So yeah, so I mean, if I really need to think about it, okay, what as a CEO would you do? How would you get through this, in a good shape? What should be your priority? For me, if I summarize it into 3 things, if I have to choose 3, I would put people first. Right. It's all about the people. I think for me, it's just all about the people, be it your customers, be it your teams or your extended teams of your retailers or your teams of your suppliers, right? So any people that you deal with in your entire chain of operation. I think that's more important because I think if they're not with you in the crisis, I don't think there's any way you can get through this. Right. So no matter what you do, what great strategies, what great solutions you have, I think if people are not on board with that, it's never going to happen. So being empathetic, being connected, motivating and understanding what they're going through, I think is the most critical part for us. And that's why, if you remember, that's why I clearly said, for us when it happened even in wave 1, right, it was very clear. We were very clear about it in telling all our employees and teams and customers that your safety is most critical. Yeah, we'll sacrifice everything other than that. Okay, so So I think is the most critical piece in any crisis. So even if it's not a pandemic, let's say we faced an economic crisis or anything like that, still, I think if you're focusing on your team and your people first, I think that's critical. Then I would move on to something about, your own thought process as a leader or your management team's thought process. So what is your approach in handling the crisis? Right. I feel that, and I think in my life stage, I've gone through quite a few crises, including the Asian crisis, the global economic crisis, so lots and lots of them probably. So what I learned on early on was also that it's not about what plan you have in place, but be clear in your head about what is the priority in your mind to handle the crisis. What is that priority? What is that thing that you're trying to keep as priorities for yourself? And that's why I try to summarize it always. So when we did that first wave, we were very clear in communicating to our people. Our priority is people, right? The customers and teams. That's number one. Being operational capable at all times, and then be ready for a good bounce back. That's it, right. So at least you're clear about that. That's how I'm going to structure in handling this problem. I don't need any fancy PowerPoints. I don't need any fancy solution. Yeah, obviously I need to come up with all the processes to achieve that in the end, but that is something that will change rapidly. But if my pillars of what I'm trying to deliver are very clear, then at least I have a guiding force. So if the situation changes, because in crisis, that's what happened. The situation changes dramatically overnight or within hours. Then you need some kind of a reference point. Okay, what should be my checkpoint? So for me, these were the 3 checkpoints. If that fits into these 3, then I do it. If it doesn't fit into these 3, I don't do it at this time. Right. So I think that is the other clarity. And third one I would say is that be flexible. I know as organization, as we become bigger and bigger, we try to become quite business process oriented, let's say, which is required because you need all those internal controls, you need all those ensuring consistency, all those things are important. But I think being flexible, especially in a crisis situation, in terms of what you're expecting. So I think setting that expectation about flexibility for me was very clear. For me, the communication was, guys, we're going to look at this on a week by week, a month by month basis. Okay. We are not going to solve this. What's going to happen over the next 6 months, or how do I get through this crisis? Let's work through this a week at a time, a month at a time. Right? It's not that you don't have a plan, you don't have scenario planning. You do all those, no doubt about it. But your locking in is for that week. Right. That gives you that flexibility, capability probably at some times. Because then if you're saying that, okay, fine, I'm not going to make this decision beyond this week right now. Let this run for this week. Right? I'll make that decision again next week. That's not a problem. Right. It allows me to be that flexible and agile. Otherwise, what happened? The entire organization is already committed for the whole year for these kind of things, and then you can't change. So those 3 things I would say is from a priority. People have a clear thought process on your priorities, and then be flexible and adaptive. Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Vikram, for sharing your thoughts and the 3 tips. And Vikram, it's been an absolute pleasure interacting with you. And on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, would like to thank you and wish you, your team, all the very best. And I'm sure as the economy would open up, we would see a good rebound, and that would help the auto industry also to thrive and help in the growth of the economy. So Vikram, stay safe, stay well, and all the very best to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Vikram.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for having me over. It's been an absolute pleasure, and wish we always have more time. But at least this format has allowed us to communicate. So thank you for having me over, and all the best to everyone. And please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikram. Goodbye.
Thank you, Rajesh. Bye.